everybody. Welcome back to another great episode of the Red, White, and You Show with the Military Medium. This episode is being brought to you by Trailblazing Communications Tools to take back your life. Well, friends, today I have with me Malachias Gaskin. Did I say that right?
You did.
All right. Well, welcome to the Red, White, and You Show, Malachi.
Thank you.
And,
thank you for having me.
You know, when a Warrior's Garden came across my radar, so to speak, and we're going to have Malachi talk about it here in a little bit, is, you know, and oddly enough, here we are when we first signed on. You go by Ralph? Nope. Malachias. And we're going to get into the whole name change and everything because it is so fascinating. I still have goosebumps listening to just what we were chatting about. I was like, hang on, we got to hit record,
right?
Get all this good stuff. So if you could, Malachias, could you share with the viewers and the listeners, you know, your journey and a little bit a little bit background and everything, but you know, your journey up to, I guess, this point in life.
Yeah. Born and raised Fort Wayne, Indiana. Grew up, I was there till I was 30. We had a family landscape business that I worked at from the time I was 10 years old until I was 30. I joined I dropped out of high school in 1992, got my GED, joined the Army National Guard of Indiana in 1994. Was a medic for about 2 years and then changed jobs to infantry. I made E7, got out after about 9 years in the Guard. And then I went to, my journey changed from, you know, that military and family business because in 2004, my father passed away. And I was trying to make it in music. And it was going really well. We were touring all over the Midwest, playing all over the place, doing all kinds of amazing things, writing great music, all of that. And the band fell apart. And during that time, we had kind of gone from, you know, I was making $20, $25 an hour with the company truck and all the perks and the benefits and the things. And when my dad passed away and the banks came in and shut us down, they were like, you know, hey, we're taking everything. I went to $675 at a truck stop. And I went from living in a subdivision in a 3-bedroom house on a nice, quiet street in a good neighborhood to sleeping on the floor in someone else's house while my kids shared one bedroom. And then moved back in with my mom where we slept on the floor and my kids shared one bedroom. And,
Sure.
You know, it got to a point where I looked at my wife one day and I was like, you know, I can't do this anymore. Like, I only know 3 things in this life. I know landscaping, I know the military, and I know music. Right. I don't want to cut grass for another ungrateful person ever again. And music isn't paying the bills. And she looked at me and she was like, go ahead, do it. And I went and seen the recruiter. That was a little bit of a journey because during my first 9-year enlistment, I ended up with a DUI, ended up, you know, 2 divorces, a bankruptcy, all the things that, you know, that comes with being in the military, you know. And so I went to the recruiter and had to go through a moral review and a review board and get 2 waivers and everything got approved. And I went
active duty as an E5 and went
to Fort Stewart, Georgia. And about 11 months after I got there, ended up on a plane to Iraq for 15 months during the surge as a medic. I was an EOD escort medic, and we transitioned from that to patrol base, where I was a medic at a patrol base living in the villages. And they realized that, oh, you used to be in the infantry, and this was a field artillery unit. And I said, yeah, you know, I was an infantry platoon squad leader, and I was a medical platoon sergeant. And they go, well, now you're a squad leader. And so now I'm leading assaults as the medic, kicking in doors, wearing an aid bag. And then that mission ended. We did that for about 6 months, I want to say. When that mission ended, I took over as the medic for a convoy security team. And then my first sergeant said, hey, you've done enough. We're going to pull you off the line. And I ended up taking over the NCO as the NCOIC of a level 2 cash hospital. Where I just, and it got to a point where this is where my PTSD started to kind of present itself. And I couldn't sleep. I'd go 3-4 days without sleeping. And my first sergeant was noticing it. He's a, 4-time combat veteran. And he was like, hey man, we're going to pull you from a lead position and I'm just going to let you work when you work and sleep when you sleep. And I was like, okay. And so I'd work 3 or 4 days, as often as long as I could. And then I'd go to my first sergeant, go, hey, I'm crashing, I'm done. And I would go sleep for a day. And this was the rest of the 4 or 5 months I was in theater, you know.
Oh, wow.
Came home, had my first, actually for the first time ever in my life, I had a nightmare. And auditioned for a couple of months while I was in Iraq. The first time I auditioned for the Army band, and I got approved as a vocalist to be a vocalist for the Army band. So we came home, and then I transitioned over to the band. And then after I got there, they were like, hey, we're going back to Iraq in about 7 months. And I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be 12 months stabilization. Like, you're supposed to give me 12 months. And so we were going to be deploying at my 9-month point. And the commanding general, General Tony Cucolo, pulled me in his office and said, hey, I know that, you know, you're supposed to have 12 months. It's at my discretion to waive that. And with what you do and your band and all that stuff, because we were a division asset at that point.
Sure.
He said, you know, like, hey, I need you over there, so I'm going to waive your stabilization time. And so I was like, well, I guess I don't have a choice. So, you know, we deployed after about being home for 9 months, and then did 13 months in Iraq again as an Army bandsman. I did treat a couple casualties as a medic with the band. We toured all over Northern. I stayed as busy as I could this time because I just didn't want to, you know, go through all that. But then I came home, and my PTSD I didn't really experience anything negative on the second deployment. It was actually a pretty positive deployment for me. But when I came home, like, it just stuff got rooted. It got locked in. Like, I guess, you know, I had multiple IED blasts and traumatic brain injuries from the first deployment that were never treated.
Sure.
And that I still struggle with. Like, I get times where I'll stutter. I'll get my brain, I call it a brain lock, where it's like all of a sudden my brain freezes up and I can't think, and things like that. And so, you know, I came home and I'm screaming and yelling all the time, and I'm fighting with people, and I'm arguing with people. I'm screaming and yelling at my kids, and you know, I'm punching tables and throwing things, and, you know, and I already had like a fairly, like, I had a temper, but nothing like this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of the thing that broke it was, like, we were at the dinner table and I was screaming and yelling at my son, my middle child. I mean, I was screaming to the point like my neck was flexing out. I could feel it. My voice was getting raw, and the louder I was yelling, he just started crying, you know. And he was 12, maybe 13, and I stood up, walk out in the garage, and I'm fuming. My wife comes out and she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I don't know, take me to the hospital, something's wrong. And so she took me to the hospital, and they were like, well, we don't think you're a threat to yourself or anybody else, so we're going to send you home. We want you to follow up tomorrow morning with behavioral health, and just see what they do. And so I get over there. Now, mind you, at this point, you know, I deployed the second time on 100 milligrams of Seroquel, which is an antipsychotic. It's for bipolar disorder. And when you take that, I mean, for those who have never taken it, like, it knocks you out for 8 hours. You're done, you know. And so I'm taking that in a combat zone. And now I'm taking Celexa. I'm taking pain medications. I'm taking, you know, heartburn medications. I'm taking medications for the side effects of those medications. By the time I retired, I was taking 21 medications a day. Sometimes some of those were 2 and 3 a day. But, you know, at this point, I'm a medic. I'm with the Army band. I haven't been keeping up on my certifications, and the Army's like, hey, we're going to chapter you because you no longer have an EMT license as a medic. And, you know, for those of you that are, you know, that know and understand the military, like especially the Army on the medical side, like, we're required to keep an EMT basic certification, which is a bunch of bull crap when it comes to our skill set, right? Like, we're trained to be almost nurses, like trauma nurses, okay?
Right.
I was basically my own PA for like 6 months, 8 months in Iraq, you know? Like, I was prescribing medications and all that stuff myself to my soldiers. And so, but the Army was going to discharge me because I didn't have an EMT license anymore. And then one day one of my soldiers and I got into a big argument. He turned his back on me, which was a pet peeve. And I swung. And when I did, I turned myself so I wouldn't hit him. Because the reflex, I just swung, you know what I mean? And I swung and I hit the door. And when I hit the door, it was a glass door, it exploded. And so my commander took me, he's like, you know, go sit in my truck. And he grabbed me up and we went to the head of behavioral health. This is a long story, I'm sorry.
No.
And we went to the head of behavioral health on post. He's like, I just met this lady like last month at a conference for commanders, you know, blah, 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 blah. We hit it off. Everything's, I like her. I want her to meet you and see what's going on. And we go in there and he's like, you know, he goes, look, this is one of my NCOs. He's amazing. Like, help him. And so she's like, well, tell me what's going on with you. And I told her everything. all the things. And she was just like, well, I'm not hearing what I want to hear or what I need to hear. And I was like, you know what, then? I go, tell me what the F you want to hear. Because this isn't a game. This is my family. This is my life. Like, I've got kids. Like, I've served for, at this point, was 14 years, 15 years. Like, I've saved lives. I've done things I wasn't supposed to do. You know what I mean? Because I had to. I'm like whatever. You know what? That's not a game. And she was just like, tell you what, I'll make you a deal. And I'm like sitting here like in awe that she's like, I'm gonna make you a deal about your life and your career. She goes, I'm gonna give you your entire medical packet. Was like inches upon inches thick, and she goes, I'm gonna give this to a colleague of mine. And if he says that you should be med boarded, we'll put you into a med board. If he says no, then you're taking your chapter. In that chapter, I had 30 days from right there. Like, that was the start of my 30 days. And so I was like, whatever. And I walked out, and my commander like comes out a couple minutes later. He's like, dude, like, seriously, she's trying to help. I'm like, whatever, dude, And so I get home, and this is on a Thursday. And I remember all this specifically because we came back on the next day, which was a Friday. And we sit down, and she just was like, so your med board's going to start on Monday. And I go, wait, what? And she was like, my colleague had your packet for 5 minutes. And he was on the phone, and he's talked to me like he's never talked to me in my life. I've known him for 40 years. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah. She's like, you should have never deployed the second time. Should have been done back then. Yeah. And so I started my med board for 2.5 years. I went through a med board process because, like I said earlier, I was National Guard and I was active duty. Active duty Pueblos and all that could not figure out where to find my National Guard records, my medical records.
Right.
And so during that 2.5 year period, this is where like my transition really started. I started using music as a way to kind of cope for myself because my therapist was a joke. And I say that being polite. I went in for 2 years talking to the same woman, and I would pour my heart out. And the last time I went to her, I came in and I looked her straight in the face, and I said, I come in every week. I pour my heart out to you. I tell you things that I can't tell my wife. I don't want to see that look on her face when I tell her things I've had to do. I'm like, I can't handle that look. I'm like, but I tell you everything because I'm invested in this therapy. Like, but you never say anything. All you do is type, click, click, click. See you next week. Like, what am I supposed to do? Help me. And just very flippantly, she looks at me in the face and she goes, I don't know, get a dog, start a garden. And I flipped my chair. I cussed her out. I went home. I told my wife, my therapist said, get a dog. And my wife said, we're not getting a dog. I have 2 dogs now, by the way. One's a service dog and one's a farm dog. And she's in the background, like smiling at me and laughing at me. And then she was like, well, what else did your therapist say? And I said, she said, start a garden. And she's like, let's go, get in the van. And I'm like, what? She's like, get in the van. Let's go. And as we get in the van, we're going to Lowe's to get all the things. And she's just like, I've been wanting to get healthier. I'm wanting to eat better. I want to grow my own food. Like, this is actually a good step. I've been wanting to do this. Oh, okay. And, as a landscaper for 20 years,
Sure.
So changing from growing grass and shrubs and ornamentals, like, to produce, like, it just made sense to me. Like, that clicked, right? And so I was transitioned. I was using music, and now I've got a garden. And I had 3 4-foot by 4-foot raised beds. I had 2 25-gallon buckets. I had 5 5-gallon buckets. We had blueberry shrubs. And we just had like all kinds of stuff in our backyard on post, right? And so the people from post housing come over and like, what is all this stuff? And I'm like, that's my PTSD garden. And they're like, okay, it's cool. And I watched them, like, I built gardens for other soldiers and their spouses, and I watched them make them take theirs down.
Really?
Yeah, I screamed this lady out, and she let me keep mine. Like, it was weird. And so, I'm going through all this, and then, the Army had paid for me to take voice lessons with this guy out of Nashville who's one of the premier vocal coaches in the country. His name's Brett Manning. He created an entire vocal programming that most people use nowadays. And so they paid for him to teach me and coach me. And I ended up meeting a mutual friend of his that became one of my best friends, that became my publisher. And we got on the phone and we're talking, and he was like, I want to send a film crew down to film you doing a documentary about the music stuff. And I was like, okay. And so we did the official request through PAO and all that stuff. And, about 6 months, 7 months later, I get a phone call from Building 1 where the general lives. It's some full-bird colonel going, I need you to come up here and talk to me about this documentary. And I'm like, oh, crap, I'm in trouble. So, I go up there and I sit down with this full-bird colonel, and I'm telling him what we're going to do. We got studio space in Savannah, Georgia Reserve. I've got musicians already booked that we're going to write music together and record these new songs. They're going to come from Nashville down to Savannah. and we're going to film this documentary. We're going to put these music videos in there and all the studio and all that stuff. And he's like, this is amazing. This is the coolest thing. Like, he's the weirdest and coolest full bird colonel I've ever met in my life. And he was like, it's just so cool, man. And I'm just like, okay, all right. And I'm in my head, I'm like, yes, awesome. And he goes, man, this is great. I'm sorry, man, we can't let you do it. I'm like, what? Like, you sold that totally different, man. Like, what? He's like, dude, you're in a med board. Like, you're not allowed to go on radio, newsprint. Like, you can't do interviews. You can't go on record. None of those things, like, because you're in a med board. And I go, what the hell, man? Like, 7 months we've been waiting, you know? I'm like, I gotta go. Like, they're buying tickets. Like, they were literally planning to buy tickets that week. And I'm like, I gotta go. Like, I gotta stop them from buying tickets. He's like, okay, go. And so I run outside. I get on my phone. I call my buddy, Robbie, and I'm like, hey, dude, like, it's done. It's a done deal. We stopped. We can't do it. I need to calm down. I'll call you tomorrow. And I hung up on him. And the next day I called him back and we got to talking. And again, during this time, like that whole 7 months, I kind of just when the gardening started and we started doing family fishing trips and weekend stuff and just, very dedicated things. And I started looking at, like, I started growing deeper in my faith and reading my Bible more and integrating, faith-based music into my curriculum of stuff I was doing. And just, I created this kind of modality of my own for what I call self-therapy, which was based in my faith, music, and gardening. And Robbie calls me up and he goes, dude, you should just write a book. And I'm like, dude, I'm a freaking high school dropout with a GED, okay? Like, I have my good enough diploma. That's what GED stands for. And he was just like, dude, write the book. You're doing so much. Just write a book about what you're doing. I'm like, dude, whatever. And I sat down and I thought it was a joke. I just wrote an outline of what all the different things were, and then all of a sudden those outline, those bullet points became chapter titles. And I just started filling in underneath each one. The hardest one I had back then, this is 2012, the hardest one I had time with was nutrition and its effects on behavioral health, because there just wasn't a lot of research on it that was online that you could find. And agricultural therapy, like there was no, so I was just going on what was working and why I thought it was working and what it was doing and the results that I felt, And so I wrote this book, and it's now been sold in 7, 8 countries. The Chinese government paid for me to fly to China and speak on using agriculture as a way to mitigate suicide.
Oh, wow.
Based out of the concepts, because the book is really just a roadmap, but
right.
It has created the concepts that I wrote down in it, has created an entire modality of its own. There's now degrees, masters and PhDs in agricultural and horticultural therapy. There's PhDs in nutritional therapy for behavioral health now. Stuff that wasn't even around when I wrote the book. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's taught in my book is taught in several universities as mandatory reading for certain psychology classes. And so all of that happened. We ended up our plan was to move to, and I'm almost done. My plan was to move to Daytona Beach with my wife. We wanted to move to Daytona Beach, Florida, because that was our vacation spot anyway. And she's still mad at me to this day about this. We came up on a 4-day weekend and sat at my publisher's house. And I was offered a job. We found a house, like, just God placed everything where we needed it, when we needed it. And so we both kind of just talked about it on the 8-hour drive back to Georgia, where we were just like, I feel like that's where we're supposed to go. And she goes, I don't want to go, but I feel it too, Right. So we came here, and the crazy thing is like my tax, that year, my tax return hit 6 weeks before it should have. My Diddy move hit 3 months before it should have.
That never happens.
I know. My final pay hit when it shouldn't have. I never missed a paycheck from DOD to VA. Like everything, like when we sold my leave back, they said it should take 4 to 6 months to get the payment. I got it in 30 days.
Crazy.
We sold a whole month's worth of leave. But the crazy part was like, we came here and we made a deal with the landlords. We'll give you half of the money now, the other half the day we leave Georgia, which will be on the 1st of the month. And then, or the 14th of the month, which is Valentine's Day. We'll pay you the second half when we arrive. But I need to go ahead and get in the house the day before. And so I actually drove up a couple days before with my son in a box truck and unloaded an entire box truck. And I've got recording artists, musicians. I've got local people. Like, I'm talking people in the industry that are on tour making mega money playing guitar for like huge names. Like they're at my house unloading my truck.
Nice.
I'm like, who are, wow. You know what I mean? And so we moved up here. I took a job. I retired at 80% disabled from the VA, 80% from the DOD, which I got to keep my TRICARE and, you know, all my benefits at that point. And I retired at 17 years combined. And then 8 months later, I was increased automatically from 80 to 100%.
Oh, wow.
So I'm 100% permanent in total, have been since I retired, basically. And then I went to college and used my GI Bill and got my degree in psychology. And then we launched our nonprofit in 2016. We bought our farm in 2016. And that was 2 years from the date that we were homeless. We went from homeless to homeowner in 10 years, and went from, you know, a failed business that was 20 years old to owning a nonprofit and being a, you know, a motivational speaker, a public speaker, a PTSD and PTG influencer. And it's weird for me to even call myself any of those things, because I'm just a dude. You know, I don't see myself as, but I've got people, I mean, I've got therapists and counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists that call me up and ask me questions about trauma, you know? And so, yeah, so we started our farm, started our nonprofit. I'm writing the next book, which is going to be called Beyond the Garden, which is the follow-up. It's really kind of like the first book on steroids, is what I say, because it's going to be like, I'm going to include all the peer-reviewed studies that show why what I used worked, and then an actual modality program that I've created, where we take veterans or first responders or people with trauma, and we bring them in and we help them designate their own individual coping mechanisms based out of things in their lives that revolve around spirituality, creativity, and physicality, and then how to integrate those coping mechanisms into their daily life.
I love how you got on, well, of course, this on your Facebook page, but on, you know, A Warrior's Garden out on Facebook. But I love how it says what works for one person won't work for everyone. But if we're going to heal, we have to start somewhere. I love that, because there are so many quote unquote gurus, right? and not saying that they don't help people, but all of a sudden it's the one treatment cures all type deal. And
which there's
saying,
no such thing.
Right. And it's just like prescribing Motrin, the Army's cure all to everything, you know. Oh, you're having, you know, you're having a hard time
Okay,
coping.
Hold on, because Motrin is like Motrin is the wonder drug, you know, Motrin and dry socks. We got that, okay?
Right.
So
drink
careful.
water, take Motrin, powder your feet,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you know, take us in a little bit to this part, just, you know, not only your journey, as you, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was saying, like, so that whole statement that you just read off my Facebook page there,
Yeah.
you know, it's and I've argued with a couple psychiatrists, and then, of course, for those who don't understand, like, there's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor, so they're looking at it as to the chemical deficiencies and the medications that need to be used. And a psychologist is they're working on your psyche, right? It's non-invasive. It's talk therapy. It's physical therapy. It's all those other things. But what I've found is, like, I'll bring a veteran or I'll bring someone out, because I don't limit my stuff. Like, I don't work only with veterans. I don't work only with first responders. I work with anybody who has a traumatic past. I focus on veterans and first responders and Gold Star families, but I'll work with anybody. But I'll bring them out and we'll start in a garden, right? We'll talk about the differences and the needs for a spiritual connection, a creative connection, and a physical connection. For me, my spiritual connection, I'm Messianic Jewish. My spiritual connection is my faith in God. You know, my creative connection is music. I love to write it. I love to perform it. I love to sing it. I like to make playlists for different aspects of my life, whether it's a drive on a road trip, whether it's I'm at work, or whether it's at the grocery store, whatever. I have playlists for whatever I want to use, right? Like different like Pandora channels and things like that for those things. Different playlists for the gym. My physicality, the thing that will get me outside of my four walls, which is not, you know, it's not Netflix, it's not Hulu, it's not a video game. It's outside, whether it's, you know, it could be in a different building, but it's outside of my four walls, is my garden. I will 7 days a week. If you come over and go, hey, teach me how to do this in the garden, I'm going to take you outside and teach you, right? And so I integrate those three things in together, and I integrate them in individual pieces and subsects and groups. And I teach people how to pull theirs in, like designate, like, you know, like designate what your spiritual connection is. Because for some veterans, because of what we've gone through, they have an anger issue with God right now. And for them, God is not their spiritual connection. But but 9 times out of 10, they have something that they connect to that gives them a connection of something bigger than themselves. It's usually service to others, doing something for someone else, or doing something out in nature. And so we usually designate what that spiritual connection is. We designate what they can do creatively, and creatively isn't really always about art or music. It can be about designing. It can be about drawing. It can be about, problem solving. It's a mental piece. And then physically, we help them designate what they like to do physically that they can do on a daily basis, right?
Nice.
And I teach them how to integrate all those and flip them, because at that point, we're pulling things that they already do, that they already enjoy, that they already have passion for, and I help them flip it from what they're doing to why they're doing it. So the intentionality changes. And so, but to go back to that comment on my Facebook wall, that post is, I'll bring a veteran or a person in. We'll go out to the garden for about 6 weeks, 5 to 6. I don't know why I chose that number, but it's 6 weeks. You got to do it for 6 straight weeks, right? If you do it for 6 weeks and you get nothing from it, now we try something else, right? So I bring them out to the garden. We do 5, 6 weeks, and they say, "Hey man, this was fun. I enjoyed hanging out with you. I really enjoyed all the talks, you know what I mean, or whatever. But gardening, I don't think it's for me. It's not. I don't think it's what I want to do." And I'm like, "All right, cool." And then where we differ and where I differ from some other organizations, and I'm not bad mouthing anyone, it's just where we differ is, I will go, "Well, what do you want to do? What's the physical thing? Do you want to go do CrossFit? Do you want to go bike riding? Do you want to go mountain climbing? Do you want to go, you know what I mean? What is the physical thing that we can get you to do?" Right? And when they tell me, when we designate, we find that together on that individual journey, that group journey there. Now I go, "Okay, let's find you a group or an organization that will help you with that." And I do a warm handoff where it's like, "Hey, hey, Joe Snuffy, this is my buddy that I've been working with. He really is interested in doing what your organization does. Can you go ahead and talk with him and see how we can't get him integrated there?" And then we hand them off,
Sure.
but that way it's not a, "Well, here, call these people." You know what I mean?
So when folks come out, so they come out physically to the farm, how do you say, here I am in North Dakota, is that something that's required for them to travel as part of this?
Some yes, some no. Like, I mean, I've done Zoom meetings with people. I'll do phone calls with them. I was doing that before the pandemic and the COVID and all the right now. But I'll help them out with that. I'll if they go, "Hey, I'd really be interested in gardening," I'll find out where they are. I'll find them a horticultural place where they're close to that I can connect them to. You know what I mean? Because again, I try to do warm handoffs. I don't try to just go, "Hey, call these people." I try to do that legwork for them. I have a couple people that will do it for me as well. I'm getting to that point where I got to start finding, finding some people that can do some of that for me, because it's getting to be almost too much. Like last weekend, one of the mainstays of the nonprofit is we build therapy gardens, which, back during World War I, World War II, they were called victory gardens. I call them therapy gardens because that's where you get your therapy. You go out in your backyard, you get your hands in the dirt, you start growing plants, you start harvesting fruits and vegetables, and you start seeing part of that creative lifestyle.
Right.
To me, as a veteran, as someone who's been to combat, been to war, who's seen all the negativity and the death and all that thing, is that we need to start rewriting that with positivity and creativity and with growth and with life. And if I can be the part of a life cycle of a plant from seed to seed, and I say seed to seed, if I'm going to put it in the ground and then harvest for seed for the next year, right? Now I've been part of the life cycle in a positive aspect as opposed to a negative aspect, right? And so I show that, I teach that. Last Sunday, we built a garden for a Marine Corps veteran he's a Purple Heart recipient. He did 3 combat tours to Iraq. He took an RPG to the leg and a foot. And we built him a garden that's 18 feet long, 11 foot deep, 2 foot tall. Got a couple tiers where it steps. They're all custom designed. Like I built one for another Marine Corps veteran in Nashville that is 18 feet long, 3 foot deep or 6 foot deep, 2 foot tall, 1 foot tall. And, we built he was a Iraq combat veteran. We did one for a Navy veteran who lives in a very compact area of Nashville, where we did a 4 foot by 8 foot garden because he has a very small yard. It's one of those areas where it's like you can open your window and talk to the neighbor.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he had a very small yard. So we just built him a little 4 foot by 8 foot garden. We built one for an Army veteran in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, where it was 17 feet long by 11 foot or 12 foot long L shapes. There was 2 of them, and they went in kind of like this and made a square.
Okay.
but we left gaps, and we did a 20 by 20 dog run on the outside to keep the deer out.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Okay.
And then we did a, what was this one? We did a 20 by 17 or 20 by 11 foot L-shaped 2-set garden for a Gold Star family where the husband had come home from Afghanistan. He ended up with cancer from the burn pits, and he passed away. And so we built one for their family. We have 3 gardens laid on for next year. And these are big gardens. These are, 18 feet long by 6 foot.
Right.
These are large,
big
right. Gardens, But I'm a big fan. I'm a believer in Maslow's hierarchy, right? So, creature comforts. And if I can take away your stressor level on food and finances, I can reduce your triggers for your trauma. I can reduce your triggers for your stress. And I can allow you to have more headspace because now your finances are going to be less stressed. Your dependency for food will be less stressed. And you'll be able to put that energy into the other areas where it's needed, right? And so that's why I do it that way.
Very cool.
If that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was great. If we could switch gears a little bit, kind of focusing on your name. I know we were talking earlier, kind of going from the given name of Ralph to Malkias. Can you share with the listeners that journey a little bit? Because I just think it's so it really kind of, in a sense, it's beautiful. It just leaves kind of goosebumps.
I was born in 1974 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. My birth name was Ralph Douglas Gaskin II. I found out about 3 years ago that my dad had a family prior to my family. He had 2 daughters and a son, and he came home drunk one night, lit the house on fire with his wife and kids in it, and thought he murdered them, and took off in his car to Indiana from Texas. And then he married my mom, and she got pregnant with me, and he named me after the son that he thought he just murdered. We both, on our birth certificates when we were born, were Ralph Douglas Gaskin II. And he's older. I mean, he's got me by about 20 months, I think it is, or so, 25 months. And so he's older than me. He's also a career felon. He's in prison, like all these things.
Sure.
And so when I made the decision to legally change it, it made it just that much easier. 2010, I had come home from Iraq, and around 2011, I started using this Skype group of people that I had met online. And it was a prayer group. It was a fellowship group. We would get together. We would take turns leading in worship and leading in prayer and leading in studies. And I had what I call a God encounter, where it was like, I have a new name for you. And like, what?
Right.
Okay, like it's time to take the meds.
Right.
But it was a God encounter where it's like, I have a new name for you. From now on, you're Malkias. And so, and I'm as a Christian, as a Messianic Jew, like I'm a big believer of, like, when something like that happens, it's supposed to be confirmed, right? Like when someone speaks in tongues, which I don't know, I'm still undecided on the whole speaking tongues, but theoretically, when you speak in tongues, someone's supposed to be there to interpret it, right? It's not just supposed to be a person goes, la, 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 and then, oh, okay, cool, you just did. No, someone's supposed to be able to interpret it. And so when I said, hey guys, this just happened, one of the other guys literally just was like, dude, so Malachias means God's messenger, and this is what his plan is for you. And he just started, like, I want to call it prophesying, which, not to sound too hokey or, maybe
no.
Weird it out when I go this route with it. It's like, this is what it is. And I'm like, okay. And so I legally changed my name to Malachias Raphael Gaskin. Raphael is Hebrew for God's healer, and Malachias is Hebrew for God's messenger.
Beautiful. Just a story that goes from, oh my God, to quite literally, as Jeff Foxworthy would say, here's your sign, right? You know, it's like, here you go. Just beautiful. Malkias, where, if obviously 501(c), so you rely on donations or partners. Where would they go?
We've done a little bit with that, because I'm not a big fan of just asking for free stuff.
Sure.
Right. And so we've actually created an online store where we sell T-shirts, we sell hats, we sell books. All of my books, like, I don't make money off of anything that's in my store. It all goes to our nonprofit. And so it's and I've partnered with some companies that have given us some very good prices on our shirts, on our hats, and I keep it simple. We have some gardening supplies. I'm hoping that next spring we'll have branded gardening supplies, like in a larger number. But it's all in there. But you can make a donation directly through it's all at warriorsgarden.com. And then we have a shop tab. Just click on the shop tab.
Nice.
And you can go in there and you can buy shirts, hats, you can buy books, workbooks, we have a little seed starter kit that has our little logos on it. It's really cute. And then we have, hopefully, like I said, in the spring, we have beanies coming. So we're going to have some beanies coming. But again, all the 100% of the profits off of that, after we pay for the material and the little bit that we have to pay out for those, 100% of that profit goes to our nonprofit.
Nice.
And then there's a donate tab in the store that you just click on that and just donate how many dollars you want to donate.
Nice. Okay.
And then if somebody wanted to do, like, I haven't done it yet with anybody, haven't really offered it, but it is available. If somebody wanted to do a recurring donation, they could email us through the website and we could set them up with, a reoccurring where just once a month took out, kind of like, some of the other big companies do, where they could donate $50 a month or $20 a month or $10 a month or whatever, automatically. So we could set that up for them. But we rely a lot on, when we build a garden, like the pre-COVID gardens would cost us around $1,000 for the large production garden that we're doing for veterans. But it's because like I said, we're doing 18 foot or 20 foot by 6 foot or whatever. And so we, with the dirt, because we're buying really quality dirt,
Right.
We're buying treated lumber, we're buying all that stuff, and then we're getting someone to cater it, so that we all get fed while we're doing it. With a group of 20 people building this all together. And then, so with all of that, like, it's gotten a little more expensive because of COVID and because of supply and demand.
Sure.
With material. This last garden, we chipped in a little extra money on our own because it ended up going into about $1,400. And so when we do a garden, now it's looking like it's going to cost us around, and these are all gardens I've done in Tennessee. Now I will travel. We actually built the very first set of gardens that we built outside of my farm was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I'm from. One of my Army buddies, my National Guard brothers that I served with, I drove 7.5 hours up to Fort Wayne, and he was the guy that actually inspired me to do the nonprofit. But he was also the guy that when my second wife and I split up and got divorced, he was the one kicking in my door every day, going, let's get dressed for eating.
Nice.
He was the one that took care of me. And so he was like, I want to do a garden center at my church. I've already talked to them. They said, we can have these 20 acres. And so I went there and we built like 15 gardens, and took care of it. And then I came back here, and like this spring, I've got a garden in Fort Wayne that we're going to build for a veteran. I got a garden in Southern Illinois that's on the calendar. And so I'll travel to build the gardens for a veteran. And really the only requirements we have is that if it's a rental property that you've been renting, I need a letter from the landlord stating that you can have the garden, because I'm not going to go build it and have it have to be torn down.
Right.
I'm not going to waste those resources that could have been used for someone that could have been a permanent fixture. So you have to have a letter from your landlord stating that you can have it. You have to have a letter from your HOA if you own and live in an HOA. I need a letter from the HOA saying that you can have it. Or if you own your home or buying your home and you don't have an HOA, then we're good. Like, those are the only way. And then, and then the beauty of the process is that we sit down, we design it together. So the input of the veteran is taken in. I get them to try to engage their creativity, and then if they're willing, once we build it, because then the physicality comes in building the garden, is that if they're willing to do it, like I ask them if I can dedicate it with a prayer, and then we'll pray over their garden before I leave. So,
Nice.
But it's an all day event when we do it. Like, it's a whole day. It's like 6 to 8 hours.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, we'll travel for
Beautiful.
it, or I've done most of them here because it's the easier. You know what I mean? It's Tennessee. I live in Tennessee. I'm a veteran service officer here in my county, and so I'll travel all over Middle Tennessee or parts of Tennessee to do it. But I will. I mean, if someone, like, I went a couple years ago to South Dakota to Kyle, to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation.
Okay.
And we built a community garden there, and I taught one of my trauma seminars.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Malkias, any last parting words or anything before we close today? Anything that we forgot to cover?
So I tell people when I teach my trauma courses or when I'm building their gardens with them is First off, I don't care what you believe, right? Doesn't matter to me. I don't care if you're an atheist. I don't care if you're agnostic. I don't care if you're a Christian. I don't care if you're Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, right? If you're not using what you believe to better yourself, you're lying to yourself. That's number one. So if you say that you believe something, you need to actively use it to improve and increase who you are as a person, to improve and increase your growth, whatever it is. That's number one. Number two is healing doesn't start while you're waiting for it on the couch. You have to get up off your ass. Sorry. You have to get up off your butt and get out there and go do something, right? Because just sitting around, and not that it doesn't help, not that going to talk therapy doesn't help, because it does. But if that's all you're doing and then sitting on your couch waiting to get better, get up and go do something. Find whatever it is that you enjoy, that you develop. One of my soldiers used to love doing freaking models of boats, like these huge, like he did the Titanic. Yeah. He's done these huge things. Like he'll build them, paint them, all the whole thing. But it was creative and it was physical.
Right.
Right. So he did those two things all the time. So I don't care what it is. Just get off your couch and go do something every day. And I get the argument from a lot of people that go, I just don't have the time to do this. And I'm like, so let me explain something to you. Let me explain it really quick. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a son. My mom has COPD and emphysema. She lives with me. I take her to all her doctor appointments and we take care of her. We homeschool our daughter. I live on a 22-acre farm. I own and run a nonprofit. I'm a veteran service officer for my county where I work 40 to 60 hours per week. We homeschool, you know what I mean? And I offer community service to the youth in my county when they get in trouble. And if I have 15 minutes every day to go out to my garden, to spend time in prayer, to do something with music, right? My 3 coping mechanisms. If I have 15 minutes a day to do something with those, everybody does.
Yeah.
It's what you're prioritizing and what you're giving your focus to, because you're focusing on, I guarantee you people are waking up and the first thing they're doing is going, hey, Facebook, what's going on? You know what I mean? I Facebook too, I got it. Okay. But it's where you're putting your focus and your time. So start putting that same effort into your growth. Look, especially as soldiers, we prepped and prepared and trained for combat for however long we were in the military, right? Whether you win or didn't, we prepped and we prepared for that all the time. Why are we not doing that same effort and that same focus on our healing?
Beautiful. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Well, my guest today is Malachias Gaskin. Malkias, thank you so much for being a guest today on the Red, White, and You show. It's
thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, thank you for your service, but more importantly, thank you answering the call, that calling, as you called it, that God moment, because I think there's more of us out there that have received that haven't answered the call.
Right.
And, we need to, more people need to pass the torch and step into that role of
I agree.
Healer. So, and find their own healing within. So, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.